everyone, before we start our video, we just wanted to let you know, if there's anyone watching who doesn't already know, we actually have our own Instagram page. It's called Outnumbered by Boys. So go and have a look at that to see some really cute pictures of the boys, even if I am a bit biased. So today our video is all about oxygen. Oxygen's always been one of the boys' biggest challenges throughout their time in hospital, and then as some of you know, the boys did come home on oxygen. So we just wanted to talk a bit about their time on oxygen in hospital and how we found it coming home and them boys being on oxygen. So I remember when we were in Hull, one of the nurses said, you know, babies can go home on oxygen. The boys might end up going home on oxygen. It's not something I'd really ever seen before, and I guess if you don't know someone who's got a baby who's gone home on oxygen, or you haven't seen a baby go home on oxygen, you don't really think about it. But so after that, I started looking into babies coming home on oxygen, and I really started reading up about it and found, oh, you know, it's something that we'd be happy to do if the time came, but we're way off that. When we finally got transported back to York, the boys' oxygen requirement started to come down slowly but surely, and we started to discuss with the boys' nurses and doctors how we'd feel about going home on oxygen. Obviously we saw it as a challenge, but a challenge we were ready to take. We'd had so long in hospital, and although the nurses and doctors try and make it as comfortable as you can, you're in a hospital environment, it's hot, you can't really relax how you want to do. And although the hospital was now in York and we live in York, and it was a lot easier to travel to and from, it was just so tiring not being able to relax, so we just couldn't wait to get the boys home. The boys were sick of the environment as well. They wanted to be out in the fresh air, doing normal baby things like lying on the floor, playing with the toys, being around their own stuff in their own environment. So we really did jump at the chance of coming home on oxygen. So as the weeks went on, we got taught all about oxygen, how to use it, what we'd be having at home, what support we'd have at home. And I remember we had our first trip out to Costa Coffee, and that was in the hospital. We had the oxygen under the pram, and loads of people were looking at us. Since then, I've realised I think people are so interested in double push chairs, because still now we get lots of people looking at us. But I do think they were looking at the oxygen as well, because you could see the canisters under the pushchair and the wires going from the pushchair where the boys were underneath to the oxygen tanks. People were quite open about asking, oh, are they okay? What's wrong? Which, I don't know, at first it did feel quite daunting because you just don't want strangers near your babies. But it was nice to talk to people. Everyone was always had a story to tell, or were always giving us support. But obviously that was before everything that's happening now, where everyone stays away as much as possible. So yeah, so after we had managed our first trip to Costa Coffee, we then had 2 nights stay at York Hospital with the boys to make sure we were fine with everything, the boys were fine with everything. If we had any questions, it was our chance to ask. And still being supported by the nurses there. So we had 2 really good nights in the hospital, and after that we got discharged. But before getting discharged, we got all the oxygen dropped off at the house, and I think that's when it really felt real. So we had big massive canisters that the boys used overnight, small portable ones that were in backpacks for if we wanted to go out during the day or if we wanted to go out and about, and then 2 tanks that plugged in that were run on oxygen, and these were so noisy. These were in the living room, and these were designed so they didn't run out. So the oxygen tanks did run out, and you had to call and get new ones dropped off. So this eliminated that, because obviously we had 2 babies and they were on quite high amounts of oxygen when they did come home. So that stopped us needing so many oxygen drop-offs. The oxygen people were really lovely. The man who dropped it off the first time taught us how to use everything, what was best to do, how other families coped. And then every time we needed more oxygen, we just rang up and it was delivered the next day. That was never an issue. It was never hard to do that. I remember when we got them home, we were just so thrilled. We were so excited. We had big wires coming off all the oxygen. So it was quite a trip hazard, especially having 2 babies. We really did have to work that one out to make sure everything was safe. I remember my first trip out, I spent about 40 minutes in the garden. I kept on checking the oxygen was on the boys properly. I kept on taking the oxygen off, checking that I could hear it. So the boys were getting it, and it took, because I thought if I'm out on a walk what am I going to do if I get into a tricky situation? So I thought 40 minutes was enough to see if everything was going to be fine. So I went out for a walk, and it was a pretty quick walk, but oh, the dummy's gone. 1 second. We're back. So it was a pretty quick walk, but after I'd done that first walk, it gave me the confidence to just go out and about and do our own thing. I didn't let the oxygen stop me. Oh, it's gone again. We'll see if he can cope about it. We didn't let the oxygen stop us in any way, shape or form. I'd say one thing that it did do, it stopped us from carrying them around like you would a normal baby. One, there's 2 of them, so that stops you carrying them around, especially at this size. But at first they were dinky little things, weren't you? But to carry an oxygen tank around with you and the baby, and you probably were going to be carrying them around to go and get something. For example, if one was crying and you need to go and get the milk from the kitchen, you're going to have to carry the baby, put the oxygen on in the backpack, walk to the kitchen and come back. So quite often we'd leave them in a safe place and have to go and run and get the milk. So I guess they didn't really see much of the house really. It wasn't till after the oxygen that they really spent much time in the kitchen. Our main 2 bedrooms were the living room and the main 2 rooms we spent time in were the living room and our bedroom. So what else about oxygen? They had little alarms that were stuck onto their stomach that told us if they held the breath for over 30 seconds, and the boys were really good at setting these off during the night. Sometimes it was accurate, sometimes they'd just gone into a really deep sleep and they were shallow breathing, and sometimes the sticker had come off a bit and it was giving a false reading. But it did really reassure us having these boxes on, and we had them on, these alarms that look like little boxes, and we had these on even after they had come off the oxygen, just to give us that extra bit of reassurance. But now we feel confident not having the boxes and the alarms on. So that was a really big step for us. Another thing about the oxygen is these boys were having the oxygen on when they were bigger babies. They were kicking around, punching their arms around, and it would come out, and it needed to be really secure in their nose to give them the right amount of oxygen. So we did have to stick it onto their little faces. We tried everything that the nurses and doctors could recommend and they could give us. Then we went out and bought our own things, and just nothing would help. It was so sore under there, but as soon as they came off the oxygen, that cleared up, which I'm so happy about. If anyone's watching this who is going to be bringing a baby home on oxygen, I would say it's a challenge, but it's all worth it just to have your babies home, and it does become the norm. You just get into a different way of life than you probably had planned, obviously, but it does just become normal, and it does make you be able to bring your babies home. And we noticed such a difference with Tommy and Kernan. From the day we brought them home, they just seem to get healthier and healthier and stronger. So yeah, if anyone's worried about it and anyone's got any questions, please do just ask me, because I'm always willing to help. And if someone could have given me a bit of guidance who'd been in the same experience, in the same situation that we were in when we were about to come home, I would have really appreciated it. So if anyone's got any questions, anyone who's just wants to know a bit more about the boys, please do let me know. So I think that's everything on oxygen. So we're going to say goodbye.